Good morning. Welcome to the holiday edition of Experience Mornings. Hey Google, turn the music down to 1. So, it's been a long time since we've chatted. So how are you? I've missed you terribly. So, it has been a few months since I've posted. It's been quite a busy work time for me, which has been fantastic. Having worked in the startup world for as long as I have, there are basically two schools of thought here. One is that some of these larger organizations are a little more difficult to work with from the perspective of innovation. They don't have the same type of thinking that goes into a startup where you're constantly moving through the process of building something from scratch, where you are needing to innovate to survive. And one thing that I've been a part of, and what I want to talk about today, is organizational change, the good things and the bad things about organizational change, particularly around Agile. And I know from a UX design perspective that there are different thoughts on what that is and how that impacts the work and what that process looks like. But the core topic of what I want to talk about today is what happens when organizational change creates problems of diversity, when it comes to microaggressions, when it comes to going back into what I'll refer to as a default mode of negative organizational dynamics. And let me be clear about this. This isn't saying that there's one or two organizations that are more at fault for this than others. I'm saying that there's a natural tendency. It's like grooves in a record, right? So I think there's a natural tendency when there's entropy, when there's chaos in an organization, to go back into survival mode, where there's a lot of finger pointing, where there is a lot of negative reinforcement of how things get done. When there are times where there are difficulties within an organization, and by difficulties I mean this: every organization has issues with change. There are always going to be problems and expected problems when an organization fundamentally shifts the way that they do their work, and it slows down that process. Now, the company I'm working with right now is a Fortune 100 company. So, despite the chaos, despite the entropy, despite what could be organizational inefficiency at let's say like the department level or even a smaller group level, as a whole, they're doing incredibly well. Now, one of the things I like to do in overlap here is to look through things through two distinctive lenses. One lens would be the organization at a micro level, at a group level. So that could work incredibly well, it could work fine, but when you're talking about cross-functional groups working together, and you layer on top of that the kind of change that happens within those groups when there's a mandate to make something, to make a big change, I think we tend to we as individuals and collectively as a group tend to veer toward survival instincts, which through the lens of diversity becomes problematic because we start to default to behaviors that are more instinctive of what our biases coming into things. And what I'll say, I'm Latino, I'm in tech, and as such I have experienced negative behavior that have come from other coworkers that might not have been sort of a conscious behavior to say, I'm going to attack this person for whatever their difference is. And I think if you've watched this, Experience Mornings at all, that you know that every lens that I look at things through, and I think most people should, frankly, is the lens of user experience. So the overarching user experience from a product perspective, but also from a personal perspective and from a cultural perspective. So what are the impacts to people individually? Individuals need to feel like they're empowered to talk about what they feel as perceived impact to themselves, whether it's culturally, whether it's organizationally, whatever the case may be. People need to feel empowered to do their jobs during the process of organizational change, to be able to raise their hand, to come up with a different perspective without feeling like they are particularly being singled out because they're trying to improve the process. There's a very top-down structure in large organizations that dictate how people do their jobs, and especially with distributed groups, sometimes that can be a little problematic. But here are three things that I think are really smart tactics that I think individuals can do to positively impact their groups and their organizations as they're going through change process. First, raise your hand, talk to your colleagues, talk to your supervisor, and tell them about what your ideas are about change. That's the very, very first step. Without communicating your own personal experience, whether you feel that during the process of change things have impacted you in a negative way, or whether you're not feeling that the change is positive, or you feel like you could improve something, you need to be able to raise your hand and talk to the person who you report to in order to be able to impact change on any level. The second thing is follow up on that. Don't just say, hey, I have a good idea, I think we should do A, B, C, and D, right? Even if it's not part of your job description, write a brief synopsis of what your ideas are, get them down on paper, evangelize them with your colleagues, talk to people in your group, get some kind of consensus if you can within your group to talk about what that looks like. And then take that back to your supervisor and start to find ways to practically implement that in your day-to-day, because ideas are way up here. And you will find that those ideas don't mean much unless they're implemented, right? The responsibility, I believe, is on the individual to kind of push and see that through to some level. And then third, if you have gone through the process of raising your hand, talking to your supervisor, taking your ideas and putting them down on paper, and evangelize those ideas, the next most important thing, find someone organizationally at the supervisor level that believes in your ideas and that can help you go through the implementation process. I'll leave you with this. If you raise your hands, if you get your ideas down on paper and evangelize those ideas and find consensus with people in senior management, then you're going to find that organizational change is not only survivable, right? It's not only survivable, but it's something that can fundamentally be a positive thing. It can positively impact your life. So thank you so much for watching this morning. And again, happy holidays. I hope everyone has a great holiday season, and we will see you again next week. Hey Google, turn the music up to 5. Oh, remember to design great things, and remember those that you design for. Cheers. Happy Wednesday. Sleigh bells jingling, jing, jing, jingling.